Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, good evening. Welcome to the Erudition Network. I am Eddie K. Phillips, the Erudition Network founder. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry that we were on here a little bit late tonight. I had some appointments that came up at the last minute that I could do nothing about, and I wanted to make sure that I was on tonight to meet with you, to discuss with you. If you are new to this program, if you are watching the recast, whatever with this program, this is the Erudition Network. This network is dedicated to providing Black history and knowledge information to the masses. We have had, this is actually, I was sitting there thinking today how we're in March now. And I think this was around the time, and I could be wrong, I'm going to go back, that we actually started the interactive. So we're fastly approaching the anniversary of this interactive program and being on for a year, providing information and talking about Black history. And I am excited about that because that shows that we've kept the faith. We've kept it pushing. And I'm happy about that. We are, hey, what's up, family? What's up, man? Glad you're here. I wanted to talk about some things tonight, as always, but I'm doing a lot. I'm doing a lot for Erudition, and we're trying to do a lot to grow this vehicle of Black history and study. And so tonight, I wanted to touch on some things about some of the things that we have coming up, things that we're trying to do. And one of them is we spend so much time here trying to give you history that is not that is hidden. I like to use that word. I don't like to say that we don't have history or that it was taken from us, but I do like to say that we have hidden history. And I want to talk tonight about a huge part of our hidden history. And what that is it is in regards to Reconstruction. Now, if you don't know what Reconstruction is, most of us, we're taught it in history classes somewhat. They touch on it a little bit. I was looking at a history book recently. I think they mentioned it all of about 5 pages that they dedicated toward Reconstruction, and the rest was they just kind of mused over it. Well, what I wanted to do tonight is I wanted to actually give a high point value on Reconstruction. I want to hit some subjects, but not everything. But I want you to understand how much about Reconstruction we do not know. How much has basically not been taught to us in school or has been hidden to our society. And so I wanted to talk about that as I go and do new things on this network and teaching Black history in a different way. But tonight, I want us to be interactive. If you get on here live, I want you to start asking questions. I want you to think about what it is and I'm going to talk about tonight. And be honest with yourself about what you may or may not know, right? And if you can do that, I think you will gain something from tonight's episode. All right. So the first thing I want to talk about is the idea of Reconstruction, because there's probably no part of American history as misunderstood, as chaotic, as walked over, hidden as Reconstruction. And so let's give the basic definition of that. Reconstruction was the period in time after the Civil War. Some would argue even before the Civil War. So I usually say that too, because you couldn't have Reconstruction without the Civil War, right? But if you look at even during the Civil War, 1860 is what I would tell you, to just about 1880, right? Some would say that Reconstruction ended in 1877, but let's round it and let's say 1880 because of the effects that were found that happened during Reconstruction. But at the heart of it, it was the period in time after slavery, right? Where blacks were free from slavery. There was suffrage. Black men were given the right to vote. And there was great upheaval in the land and fundamental change in America because after that, blacks were allowed to own property, to run for office, to vote, to basically be able to decide their own destinies for the first time in hundreds of years, and definitely for the first time since the formation of the United States. And that was across the board. No more just free men who were born free. Everybody was free. And because of this, the society changed. The ideas of society changed. And so what we saw in Reconstruction was something that had never happened before, and honestly has not happened since in the United States of America. And the realization of that, the points of that, are to say to you that why is it, if this was such an important time for African Americans, why is it that many of us can't really articulate anything about Reconstruction? Few of us can even tell you what period of time that it happened, what essentially happened during that time. But blacks own land. They were treated as equal citizens. Amendments had passed. And at the height of what is called the nadir, right, of race relations in this country, that we still don't understand Reconstruction as well as we should. So tonight, I want to touch on a couple of things about that. I want to go into some of the issues that happened during Reconstruction. There are many people, many historians, some you know, some you do not know, who went about after the period of Reconstruction and rewrote the history. I do not think that many people really focus on the idea of how significant and how fundamental it was. Because think about the people who lived not only in America, but who introduced ideas throughout the world. Darwinian understanding, right? William James writing about so many things that changed. W.B. Du Bois, Ellis Aberholz, who wrote about the history of what was going on. The nefarious John W. Burgess. And of course, William Archibald Dunning. And many of those names elude us. And that is unfortunate because we do not know these people and we do not know these names, we allow ourselves to think that this period of time has no connection to who we are right now and today. So I'm going to talk to you of why it affects us today. In order to do that, I must first talk about the ideas that happened. Now, we said that blacks were free, but And we know coming out of the Civil War, we know they do teach a little bit of Black history about the Black congressmen and senators and politicians and authority figures and leaders who emerged during that time. And those things are true and wonderful. We know about Andrew Johnson taking over the presidency after Lincoln's death. However, if Blacks were given all of that after emancipation and after the Civil War, how did we take a step back? If we moved into the idea of being able to vote and to be considered human beings and citizens, how did we go backwards? How did we lose our way? And ladies and gentlemen, that is the thing about Reconstruction. That is the thing that that many people need to embrace and understand. Reconstruction took us backwards. It took us backwards. It put us into a situation where we no longer, right, saw ourselves or were put into a place of being able to own and the promise that was given to us that Lincoln said would happen post-Civil War. And there's a reason behind that. And the first and primary that we're going to talk about is William Archibald Dunning. Dunning was a man who created a whole system of thought. William Archibald Dunning is a name that many people, you may have heard me mention this man on Erudition at some point. But he is considered to be the father of revisionist, racist thoughts about the Civil War, about Reconstruction. He is a person who basically contributed to the rise of the Second Klan. And he lived a long time. He lived from the 1850s all the way until the early 1920s. The Dunning School was a school that was behind some of our known presidents. Woodrow Wilson, who is arguably one of our most racist presidents, was a follower of the Dunning School, the Dunning School of Thought. Books were written, lies were told over and over again about who we are. Cannibals All, Rage of Negroes. People wrote many books. Philosophy of the South, The Truth of Reconstruction, and on and on and on and on and on. So, Mom said, so was Reconstruction for Blacks, or it was for all of us? Reconstruction involves all of us. It is one of the primary things that people do not want taught in public schools. If I were to go and ask people, young folks, about Reconstruction, which I do, many can't tell me anything about it other than they freed the slaves. The freedmen were able to have stuff, and then all of a sudden, black codes. It seems as if nothing happened. W.B. Du Bois once said that in his book, right, the souls of black folks, that the Negro walked out of the darkness into the light for a brief moment before being pushed back into the darkness. That is how you have to look at Reconstruction. So tonight we had to ask, how did that happen? How did that happen? What made us get to that point? Revision that is still active in our children's school books today. Revision. If you think about the Dunning School, and I'm going to give you a very good interpretation of what the Dunning School taught, so you understand what the revision meant. Basically, what Archibald Dunning taught was that when the Civil War ended, people in the South, they were okay with losing the war. They were fine with it. And that they took the defeat without any catcalling, backbiting, and they understood that they had lost. And they told themselves that they were going to do right by the freed black man because they understood the black man. And they understood that the black man had not been taught and that they had to be the caretakers of the menagerie, and I use that word, of black people because the black was considered to be a savage. And so they felt that they had to be the caretakers of black people. They desired to do that so that the country could return back to normalcy. Dunning also taught that Abraham Lincoln was behind his way of thinking, Dunning's way of thinking. And because I don't know if you all are, if you're still hearing me or what was going on. We had a momentary blackout here. If you can, please let me know that you can still hear us. We had a momentary blackout right there, but I think we're back. I think we're back. I think everything's all good right now. If you can, let me know. Post it in the chat so we can continue where the last thought was. It's funny tonight. It seems like everything is seeming to go a little bit crazy tonight on the show. We got in here a little bit later, and then all of a sudden, now I'm back in and out. So please let me know if you are connected, so I know that we are actually back on and good. Thank you, Sean Anthony. Thank you. Thank you. was weird how we dropped out right there. We'll take a pause for just a moment. Give us just a moment. All right, we are back. Look, I don't know what's going on tonight, and I'm not going to be angry or get mad about it. But we were having for some reason we kept dropping out, and I wanted to make sure that we could cover that and know that I'm back on with you. If you are still with us, if you're not, please come back. We are still live, and we are still talking about Dunning. Right? We're still talking about Dunning. Let's send this out to everybody so you know. You're back live. All right. So let's get back into this about Archibald Dunning. If you had lost us and you're not back, you can comment later. We'll get back to it later. Or watch the replay. We didn't understand who Archibald Dunning is. As I was saying, the idea that Dunning put out was that Abraham Lincoln had embarked on this idea of wanting to embrace the South. And in other words, making the Southern folks the caretakers of the Negro, of the black man. And so Dunning wanted to push this idea, right? And in order to do that, he had to say that Andrew Johnson, right, was doing what Lincoln wanted to be done. When Andrew Johnson went and basically reinstated or allowed the citizenship of former Confederate secession to come back. And this is, remember, what Andrew Johnson was actually impeached for. Andrew Johnson allowed Southern plantation owners, slave owners to come back into the Union. Southern congressional folks to come back into the Union and to go back into the seats of power that they had before they had broken from the Union, which you could consider to be, at the least, treasonous. But Johnson, right, still said to himself that he wanted to keep, right? He wanted to Andrew Johnson was such a character. And because Andrew Johnson was a Southern sympathizer. He was only put on Lincoln's ticket to equal out and balancing out the ticket for the South, for the border states during the war. And so Andrew Johnson had a lot of ties to Southern plantation owners, to Southern rebels. And so the idea was that Dunning wanted to put out was that Johnson was a defender of Lincoln's legacy. And that the reason he had been impeached was because folks in radical Republicans wanted to steal power. and they wanted to be able to hog, how does Spike Lee say it in his movie, bamboozle ignorant blacks who didn't know anything about the law and who had been taken care of by the Southern people, not given the idea that every black person was not ignorant or animalistic or had been kept away, and that blacks had to actually learn how to read and do things secretly from their masters. So there were a lot of blacks who were actually intelligent, but Dunning didn't include that at his revision. What Dunning wanted people to believe, right, was that the blacks were being manipulated by the South, by the North, and that what they were doing was trying to radically reconstruct the country with the name Reconstruction. Your kids today are still taught about carpetbaggers from the North who came down to the South to sell new ideas to the folks in the South. They're still taught about scalawags. That name Scalawag comes from the idea of people who were in the South, Southern whites, who dared to align themselves with Freemen and Northern ideals. They called them Scalawags. And you can go and look in your children's history books today, and I guarantee you, when you look at any of the 5 pages that may be there, if that, for Reconstruction, carpetbaggers and scalawags is in there because they want you to remember that part of the history. They want you to see that those people were unscrupulous, wrong. Rather, they came from the North or they were living in the South. Because they wanted to do better for the blacks, they were wrong. A scalawag was somebody who wanted to band together with free blacks to create a better society in the South and in the North. But because these people were Southern, they were called scalawags. I cannot emphasize that enough, because when you hear that, we're seeing it in our kids' history books today. And what is a scalawag? A person that is unscrupulous, mischievous, a liar. He's worse than a carpetbagger because he's from the South and he dares to turn on us. It is amazing to me how many of us do not know the Dunning School of Thought, but yet we all still learn from it. Dunning thought and taught, and hundreds, if not thousands of professors who were inspired by him, that is not a make-up number, taught this revisionist idea of the Civil War, taught that the South's white community was supposed to be able to take care of Southern business, home rule. Home rule is a huge name in the history of Reconstruction because it basically was a euphemism for supremacy. This is our home. Does that sound a lot like let's take our country back? Let's take our homes back? Reconstruction was full of many terms like that, like the Redeemers, who came to redeem the promise that they felt had been stolen. And this is what made Reconstruction such a dark time. The idea was formed in Reconstruction that affects Black people today of the Black, ignorant, incapacity, foolishness, dumb, don't know, unable to take care of, violent, mischievous, sexualized Black person. Childlike. And we still see this today. Tonight, as I was going through all these problems, trying to getting in here late, the feed dropping out, I said, I will make sure I cover this today. Reconstruction is one of the things that needs to be taught because our children's school books don't teach it. During the time of Reconstruction, Robert E. Lee passed away. He died. And to show you how things went wrong with Reconstruction, when Robert E. Lee died, the nation mourned. I want you to really think about that. When Robert E. Lee died in 1870, the nation mourned as if it had lost a president in both the North and the South. Because revisionism of the lost cause had started to take over. Revisionism, brought in by Archibald Dunning. He wasn't the only one, but he was the leader in it. That revision is so deep because it inspired what happened in the country for 100 years after it. When you see folks waving Confederate flags and saying this is their legacy, their history, that's taught from the Dunning School of Thought. When Robert E. Lee passed and people were waving those flags and they newspapers bordered their papers in black and folks were wearing black armbands and people in the North and the South revisionist idea of Robert E. Lee being this humanitarian, this beautiful human being, and ignoring that he himself had owned slaves, whipped slaves, put salts in the backs of whipped slaves so that the pain would be worse. But that wasn't remembered. What was remembered was the glorious South and how the Southern folks were supposed to be able to take care of the blacks, that black problem that went on for 80 years after the Civil War, as they called it. It's diabolical. It's contrived. And it's still a part. People lie to themselves and say it doesn't exist, but go pick up your history book. Think about what you know about Reconstruction tonight, if you are honest with yourself. One of the other nefarious things that was told was Negro rule. The fear that was put into the poor whites to tell them that the Republicans want the black to rule over you as your ancestors ruled over them. The fear of the other foot dropping because of all of the things and evil things that have been done to the black slave. So fear abounded in the Dunning School of Thought. Let's answer the question here. Sean Anthony said Reconstruction was supposed to be a time of rejuvenation for the country. What time to look away from slavery towards freedom. However, instead, many racist whites saw Reconstruction as an opportunity to redeem their country and take it back to the good old days. That is exactly what happened. It is exactly what happened. Take it back to the good old days. Remember the South. But let me ask you a question, since I got some of you young folks that are out here. I asked my sons this question, so they may answer it. They've been asked this question. How did they take it back? How did they take it back? If we had been given the right to freedom, right, and black suffrage gave you the right to vote, how did they take it back? Who allowed them to take it back? What were the things that led to them being able to revision and take things backwards? I asked that question. I'm giving you time to answer. What allowed it? What pushed it? What took it back? What put black people back into a situation where now they were in another kind of slavery? Eddie says the rise of the Klan. Any other thoughts on that? What pushed black people backwards? I can tell you revisionist history didn't help it, but that's history. What happened that pushed us back? There are a couple of things. I could give you, I can kind of go a little bit with Eddie with the Klan. That's some of it. What else? In the middle of Reconstruction, what happened? Sean Anthony said the lack of black government officials. No. South Carolina itself had a whole government full of black men that we don't even talk about during the time of Reconstruction. Can anybody tell me what happened in 1873? Daniel said Jim Crow. Jim Crow came after. But what's pushed us back? I gave you guys a little bit. Let me tell you a couple of things that pushed us back. One, the federal government stopped being committed toward Reconstruction. And the reason they stopped being committed toward Reconstruction was because of scandals that had happened in the Grant administration, the credit mobilier scandal being one of them. The other thing was the Panic of 1873 that no one really talks about. The Panic of 1873 was a stock market crash, was a financial crash. In the middle of Reconstruction and in the middle of scandals. So what happened was the Democrats, the Dixiecrats in the South, won seats. They won a humongous amount of seats in the House and in the Senate. And they replaced Republicans. The fear of financial ruin, issues, right, calls for compromise between those two parties. And whereas in the beginning of Reconstruction, these the radical Republicans refused to allow, they censured the former members of the Confederacy from being able to cast votes for anything in Congress. So that meant that the radical Republicans could pass Reconstruction legislation to help the freed blacks. That meant that the president of the United States, who sent troops down to the South. He was able to do that. But when the panic happened, when money was lost, I tell people all the time, if you want to trump racism, look at money. Money always speaks more than race. And so when money was lost, panic hit, people couldn't eat. It became, not posh to be so concerned with the blacks. As a matter of fact, jealousy arose because then people started saying, wait a minute, blacks are owning land, they're doing well. But no thought was put into the fact that they had spent most of their lives, some of them, maintaining those crops, maintaining those fields, sharecropping, as slavery. They had learned skills, how to build, blacksmith, how to horse, put shoes on horses. They learned these things for their masters, so they were skilled workers. That wasn't looked at. The idea was they're doing better than we are. And so the old plantation owner in the South and the Southern elite who still had money post-Civil War, because Andrew Johnson had allowed them to be able to come back and had no issues with it. They didn't lose anything. They still had money and power. What they didn't have was influence, because Grant had sent federal troops down to circumvent that. But when the panic happened, right, money became an issue again. Money became something that they needed to be concerned about. So, what else? When you look at that, I want you to understand what was going on, what pushed us. And when those folks took over, the Republicans, who were doing it for political expediency, changed their thoughts, or Reconstruction. You all are taught heavily that it's the Klan, that the Klan is what pushed away Reconstruction. That is not true. The Klan is one part of it. One part of it. You're not taught that the abolitionists, when black suffrage became an issue and black men were allowed to get the vote, that female and some male abolitionists, former abolitionists, suffragists, temperate movement folks, turned their backs on blacks and called them ignorant. People who had said that they should be free didn't mean that they had to care about them that much. When it became competition, they pushed them away. We don't talk about how Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, people like Ida B. Wells, right? How these folks had to go into create separate black groups for suffrage, for women's voting, because white suffragists completely washed their hands of blacks. That's a part of Reconstruction too. When a society feels that there is nothing to gain and a lot to lose, mindsets change. When your family's hungry and you feel you can't eat and they're eating, they seem to be able to survive. How is that? But no thought is put into the fact that these folks come from a survival mentality. So, what is the best thing to do? Let's get them back under control. I told you all several months ago that what they did also was they started to penalize free blacks, called you vagrants, called you bums, called you criminals. Have a misdemeanor crime happen and you are going to jail. You on a chain gang. You are put into a lease system, a prisoner lease system, another form of slavery that was authorized and supported by church groups, former abolitionists, Republicans and Democratic alike. The convict lease system was in place to keep a hold, as we said earlier, right? To keep a hold of that black man, to provide that home rule of the South. But little narrative, little context is given to the fact that these folks were doing well for 5 or 6 years. So, when you look at the Dunning School, when you look at your history books, and you see that term scalawag, carpetbagger, but what you don't see, or you see the term the redeemers. But how many of you have heard about the Black and Tan movement, the Black and Tan Party? How many of you understand Reconstruction from what Black folks actually lived through, the Freedmen's Bureau? How much attention is given to that ideal of the Freedmen's Bureau and what it was designed to do? You don't, but you know a lot about the Klan. You know a lot about the oppressor, because that is what the Dunning School was about. Glorifying the oppressor as the righteous, and demonizing the laws and the things and the people who tried to create a society that was combined. When W.B. Du Bois in the 1930s wrote Black Reconstruction, it was ignored. That book was ignored. But he wanted to let people understand, why did Reconstruction fail? Reconstruction is such a big part of our history, of who we are, what we are, where we're going right now. Because educators understood, let's change, let's revise this Southern story. Let's not tell these things. Let's keep them in the dark on this, so that we can construct a story that better fits the narrative of the righteous white man in the South. It's no surprise that Thomas Dixon, who wrote The Klansman, later became Birth of a Nation, was inspired by Archibald Dunning. It's no surprise that Woodrow Wilson, a college professor, was a Dunning professor. We don't have a lot of people on here tonight, so I'm going to leave this for the folks who watch the replay. We need to be honest about what we don't know about Reconstruction. We need to be honest because it still affects our lives. Dunning told people that the failure of the black man to stay viable, to own property, to have land, to stay in the legislature was proof of his unfair push into that position. The Dunning School told people that intellectual blacks were an anomaly, not a majority. The Dunning School pushed the idea of the childlike black, the violent black, that we still see in our media, that we still see in hear in our music. The ebonic terms and the malprorisms when you're talking incorrectly, emphasizing your R. That comes from somewhere. The Dunning School inspired minstrel shows of white people putting on blackface and talking as in what they believe how blacks talk. You know, that's this is all from Reconstruction. A period in American history that we do not talk about or study enough. Reconstruction changed the idea of religion in this country from the traditional Methodist, Baptist. We don't talk about it. Catholic, we don't talk about it. However, all of those folks who started the holiness, Pentecostal movements, there were black-based religious movements were born out of that peculiar time of blacks moving forward and back, known as Reconstruction. White folks enacted at the end of it Jim Crow, black codes. They disenfranchised blacks. Many of us don't know that at the beginning of Reconstruction, Confederates, folks who had fought in the Confederacy, could not vote at a time that the black man could vote. They don't know that blacks had church meetings, group meetings. So even though the black man was allowed to vote and the woman was not allowed to vote, they did something that the whites didn't do. They got together and the family came up with what they would vote for. Because the slaves understood that whenever they did something during slavery, unbeknownst to the masses, they had to get everybody together to agree. They came from that mentality, and they kept that going. So when you see things going on in this society, and let's think about it. If we give the thought that Reconstruction ended in 1877, but even if we were trying to be charitable and say, okay, it ended in 1880, ladies and gentlemen, we are right now in 2022. 2022. And we're still seeing the effects. We're still seeing the effects. Almost 150 years later, we're still seeing the effects in society. This has been an interesting broadcast. There's not too many people online, but I don't care about that. What I cared about tonight is I am at a point right now in my teaching where we have to elevate and we have to do better. Yes, racism has a long memory. And despite all of the things that went on with the broadcast tonight, this message I want you to take. If you watch the rebroadcast, watch it on YouTube, watch it later. I want you to understand this and why I stress the idea of Reconstruction, and why I think it's something that is right now, even more so than early Black diaspora history. I think, in my opinion, that Reconstruction for the African American is more important, because many of us cannot trace our ancestors beyond the Civil War. Many of us don't know the names like Charles Fitzhugh, Robert Shufelt. Many of us don't understand the books and the things that have been put out for generations to suggest that we are not who we say we are. And many of us lacked the ability. We lack the ability to even go back and defend it, because we don't know who we are. We don't. And things like Reconstruction have stripped that from us. I want you to take tonight that we have to know who we are. We have to embrace our history in its whole. We need to inquire about things that are within 100 years, a generation or two of where we are right now, and how did it shape us? We are no longer called the Negro, but the mentality has not changed. It has not changed. The terminology's changed, but our realities have not. I don't know of any period in African American history more important to cover today than Reconstruction. I don't know anyone that I've sat with who has a really good grasp on the laws that were written that allowed men to lynch my ancestors, on the things that were said and permitted that allow young children to be brutalized, raped, and killed. Some narratives, slave narratives, the Black folks said they caught more hell after freedom than they ever caught while they was being held captive, because they were no longer property. And the anger overwhelmed. People don't know about the Ku Klux Klan Act. People don't know about the testimonies of hundreds of freedmen talking about how the Ku Klux Klan was used to terrorize. You know that the Ku Klux Klan came to power. Few of us know about the districts that were put into place in the South, or what Grant sent the troops there to do. You just know that the first Klan was put down. You don't realize that a lot of those men hid their old Klan outfits and pulled them back out after Reconstruction. We are at our hour. I ask you, despite the break that we had with the internet, I ask you to be honest with yourself about how important Reconstruction is to you. And if you don't know, if you feel that there are things about it that you don't understand, stand by. I got something coming for you. We are going to teach. Rather it be in our homes, our churches, our private friendships, we're going to teach. We're going to learn. Because only through learning can we understand and have the capacity for compassion. Only can we understand why it is ludicrous to tell people that slavery was so long ago and ignore Jim Crow, black codes, redeemers, Klan, white citizens groups. I thank you all who have stuck with us tonight. We came on about 30 minutes later, and I apologize for that. But we had some things that were going on, and then we lost feed for a little bit. But as always, we will be back next Thursday. Next week, I'm going to make an announcement of something that we're preparing in the area of education. And I want you to honestly get on our Facebook site and let us know, what do you think about Reconstruction? Do some reading this weekend. And come on there and let us know how you feel. Answer this question for me. Do you think that Reconstruction affects the way we think in this country today? That's our question. I'll post it on our Facebook page, but you can also put it in our chat on our YouTube, whatever your answer is. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get out of here. I thank you for your time. I thank you again for sticking with us through some of the issues that we had tonight. And I ask that you join us again, share this episode with family, friends, and other ones, and let them know, hey, that we're on the air every Thursday to talk to you about history and understanding and knowledge. Until we meet again, have a good one. Until next week. Thank you.